state of fear and misery. No youngest me anymore. And live in a constant state of fear and misery. No young, no young, no. Live in a constant state of fear and misery. No youngest me anymore.
What is up, punks? It's Shinobi, and we are bringing you Block Digest episode 243 at block height 656,012, Sunday, October 8th. So, Janine, which quantum reality are you living in?
I'm living in the one where I still don't really care who wins the election because the underlying system hasn't changed fundamentally. But it is still hilarious to have the election day extended into election week and possibly election month.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be real fun. Let's just say I really won't be bothered too much if Biden is actually certified a winner, because then somebody I know has to get a giant fake like orange tan because he made a bet with some buddies.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the safest bet is to just bet that we all lose, and anybody who bet that won.
Yep. I mean, I am kind of terrified at this point that no matter what happens, no matter how court proceedings go, no matter what verifiable evidence is put forth, that a large chunk of people are just going to silo off into their own parallel realities and just completely refuse to accept an outcome.
Including the candidates themselves.
Yep. I mean,
I have to say the labels that Twitter was putting on some tweets were kind of interesting.
Well, it's just kind of weird to me that was going on under the austences of nobody is allowed to claim victory until something is certified. But then, the other guy's kind of doing a lot of that and not getting called out on anything, despite a lot of outstanding, unfinalized votes. So that's kind of odd.
Yeah, I mean, this is what happens when you when you have elections and then a bunch of people on social media, especially one person who is not afraid to use social media to the full extent possible to share his every thought. You get this problem where, just everybody is claiming a result and claiming to be an authority on the result, and this is what happens when you have people vying for power.
Yep. Who's your oracle?
I have to yeah, well, that is a great question, actually, considering so many people still want to, put oracles and blockchains together. This should be this should be a lesson in how difficult that is. But I have to say I do find it hilarious. I think the funniest thing of all is the name collision incident that happened, where the campaign, I don't know exactly what it was supposed to be for because I still didn't watch it, but I find it hilarious that the campaign event where Giuliani was supposed to speak ended up being in the parking lot of a landscaping company because they mixed up Four Seasons, the landscaping company, and Four Seasons Hotel. Like, that is the epitome of Oracle issues, naming collision, everything went wrong.
I mean, if that's what happened, that is, I'm not gonna lie, pretty hilarious. But
is that another thing that did not happen?
No, it's that there is a really weird thing as far as that landscaping company and that name, where there's actually a shit ton of them all over the country, and all of them make what look like very structured donations to different Democratic campaigns. So
Oh, it's
that's
even
kind of
worse.
weird.
Wait, so you're telling me they actually chose to have a thing at the landscaping company? That's even weirder.
I mean, potentially from what it looks like, because it looks like very weird donation structuring. And like, I don't want to make any definitive claims on anything at this point, given how batshit insane information flow is back and forth. But I actually dug in and verified that kind of pattern in donations with all of these companies with the same rough names all across the country, and it's really fucking weird.
Yeah, I mean, like the thing that I posted after election day, if we can call it that, was David Bowie's I'm Afraid of Americans, because seriously, like everyone scares me. Everyone tweeting about the election just scares me. The way that they're like shouting at each other or losing their minds or crying. And it's like, guys, seriously, they're fundamentally nothing has changed. Like, I feel like everyone, even the people who did not vote for Obama, like they've just forgotten that the Democrats, the Democratic Party, and the Obama administration, they did a bunch of really awful shit. Like it's just completely skated over people's minds. And I think part of the problem and the reason that happened is because well, the terrible shit that he was doing was mostly overseas to a great extent. And so, it's people over there, we don't care about them and we've forgotten about them, but some of us still remember, and some of us are not expecting anything better from the guy who was literally the vice president under that administration. Like, how the hell do you think anything is going to be different? Like, anyone who looks back on the Obama years with like rosy glasses, I feel like it's going to be a similar thing with Kamala Harris, where they're thinking so much about the fact that, oh, look, representation, and they're completely forgetting that having diversity in your war criminals is not exactly a goal to aspire to, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. One thing that just worries me is like, I see a lot of people who are more concerned with I want my outcome rather than let's see what the legitimate outcome was, and that's what it was. And that really is what worries me more than anything. Like, I'll say it, I voted for Trump again this time. If legitimate tabulation in this going through courts equals he lost, that's what happened. But
Wait,
it kind
you
of
so you
worried.
lied
Yeah,
to me.
yeah,
You were voting for Keck.
yeah. I
You
lied.
lied to me.
Yes, I did. But the point is, though, it's like, you know what I mean. The concern should be, did this process happen legitimately, not my outcome at all costs. And that's what really worries me, is people sliding into the mindset of my outcome no matter what.
I mean, well, from my position, none of this is legitimate because I'm a voluntarist. So elections are all not legitimate in my perspective, and so squabbling over the legitimate new dictator is kind of just, like I said, scary. This all just it's never going to go away. Nothing's changed, and people are losing their minds.
I know, but it's just, like participating in it ostensibly, you are going, okay, this is the process. And it just really scares me how many people participate and then turn around and it's like, I just want my outcome. Like, it's not about, was the process fucked with, distorted. It's just, I want my outcome. And that's when these kinds of systems start getting to the real scary point of it's just going to turn into a fight eventually.
Yeah, I mean that is that is the underbelly of all politics, and the only difference is now we're actually seeing some of it, and they're fighting over that underbelly. So, um, yeah, I mean so something I learned, which I did not know was a thing, and after this, I think we should stop talking about the election because seriously, it's um so not Bitcoin. But something that I learned over this past week is that like I've never whenever I've referred to previous presidents in the US or any other country where they have this president position, I've always referred to them as like former President X or depending on the structure of the sentence, then president. Like I'm clearly distinguishing it as being someone who is a president in the past. And I've recently been informed that because I was being confused by all of the people who were referring to Biden, Vice President Biden. And I was like, but wait, he's not vice president anymore. And I've since been told that once you become president, you get to keep the title for the rest of your life. And I'm like, seriously? That is so confusing. Why do people do that? That makes no sense. Like, why? It's kind of like imagine like it's a job. It's like the claim is that the role of a president, it's a job. Like you're not being anointed or something. So the idea that like you've done your job, you've now left, and you're still being referred to by your previous job title sounds very strange to me. It's like, I don't know, give an example. Not that you would ever want to do this, but it's like being elected president of the Bitcoin Foundation, and then you leave the Bitcoin Foundation, and then you still get referred to as the president of the Bitcoin Foundation for the rest of your life. Like, it makes no sense to me. Why do people do this? It just really kind of like drives home that the presidency and just a lot of government positions in general are not actual jobs. Like they literally think that they are like royalty or some kind of priesthood or something where you get a title and once you have it, you always have it.
I motion that if Biden is certified winner, we should change that for Trump to president in exile.
Well, I do believe I mean I don't know if this is true either, but honestly like I don't trust anything I'm seeing about any of this right now. But there was some news outlet that had a quote attributed to the Biden campaign where they said something like, "Oh, if he doesn't want to leave the White House, the Secret Service are at liberty to eject trespassers." And so, like, wow, you're really going for that card, aren't you?
Yep, this is gonna get very reality TV.
You are all trespassers on my sanity. Get out.
I don't think they're gonna obey that court order. But all right. We need to shift topics, or we're gonna be talking about this for the next 10 minutes. Alrighty, so I'm sure everybody listening by now has seen the Lightning Pool liquidity market proposal dropped by Lightning Labs. And I have pretty much spent the last week pouring through this paper and thinking about this. And really, this is probably one of the biggest pieces of infrastructure this well thought out, developed for the Lightning Network, period. And this is going to be a monumental part of that network going forward. So in the shortest terms possible, they created this idea called a shadow chain. And pretty much the gist of that is, think of it like a virtual blockchain on top of the Bitcoin blockchain that's actually taking up block space, confirming transactions. And the whole idea is to enter this shadow chain. It has an operator. And what you would do is create a 2 of 2 multisig with that operator. get a pre-signed transaction to withdraw your funds after a timeout, and then load that wallet. And what this effectively does is create an account on this shadow chain. And the whole idea behind this is to effectively coordinate finding incoming liquidity on the Lightning Network. And they also create this concept of a channel lease. And so it's pretty much just like a normal Lightning channel, except instead of just the relative time delay to allow penalty responses, there is also an absolute CLTV time delay to pretty much guarantee that if somebody opens a channel lease with you, that's guaranteed to be there for as long as that CLTV timeout. And so pretty much with these two main pieces, constructed a non-custodial distributed auction block where people off-chain in this shadow chain construct can pretty much put in bids in order to pay a small premium on the overall amount of capital that would be locked up with you to have a channel lease open to them. And so this is just perfect in the sense of two core reasons. One, selling channel leases like this allows routing nodes to have a lot more predictable income for locking up their liquidity that isn't correlated to whether they're processing payments or not. And then two, it is a massive, massive benefit versus things like Breeze Wallet or Phoenix Wallet, where the actual wallet operator has to come up with receiving capital for you and put all of that into a channel locked up to you. So that type of I can receive right away Lightning Wallet is really expensive for those providers to pay for. Well, this kind of marketplace allows them to just pay a small premium on the capital available to users and have some other routing node on the network open that channel with them. So it makes these types of wallets and products a lot cheaper for the operator to bootstrap, but it's also a huge improvement and versus like just the trust model of something like Breeze, where they open the channel with you. They are also functioning as your watchtower. If you just open a wallet there and you don't already have funds to front load in your channel, then they are always in a position where they have an original channel state with all the money on their side. And they're also the provider of all these other security guarantees. And so it's just overall, like the structure of this is just really brilliant in terms of distributing the ability to solicit and gain access to receiving liquidity without having to go to big centralized points or liquidity providers for that. And it really even goes so far into I think where this can build in the long term is going to be so important. Because what they've done here with this kind of marketplace auction style matching, I think with more of a reputation dynamic built in, this is also a perfect thing for solving some issues that would crop up in channel factories, such as having a bond or a reputation or some factor where I have a high degree of confidence if I get into a channel factory with all these other people, they are not going to be disruptive. They are not going to force things onto chain and cost people money just to be a dickhead. And I feel like this kind of abstract, market design here would be the perfect type of solution to throw at that problem as well. And, really the only real structural or architectural issues I can think of in this is the minimum amounts that could be leased in channels obviously have to be cost effective on chain. So if dust outputs or the minimum viable economically output value on chain gets really high, then this system starts to run in those concerns. And then also the fact that things are pretty much just batch settled for an auction block in transactions directly on chain. So this shadow chain operator, the whole idea is they receive bids at the end of a bid block. They look at everything, match them, and then send around a transaction to everybody in that block to sign it with their 2 of 2 account values, and then actually pay fees or premiums to people opening leases to you, and then to actually open those channel leases. And, my first kind of thought there was spamming things on chain is probably not the most scalable thing. But really thinking about it, if you try to open a channel somewhere to make money and it's not making you money, you're going to be doing those on-chain operations anyway, just to try to find the best place to allocate that money. And so really this kind of marketplace, it doesn't really change that dynamic with block space at all. It just hopefully will make it a lot more efficient. So you might even be doing this, these on-chain operations even less, because this whole auction system allows you to find those places you want to be, because they'll make you money a lot more efficiently. And so really this is a massive badass piece of infrastructure and a protocol from it out of Lightning Labs. And honestly, this is, I think, the coolest thing I've seen developed for the Lightning Network since it launched, period. This is going to be so fucking valuable in the long term.
Ooh.
This is awesome. I do believe we have 2 more awesome things related to the Lightning Network lined up.
Yeah, so this is something you found, so I'm not sure what if you may see the same significance as me, but it appears that a podcasting index site, and I'm not sure everyone who runs it, but Adam Curie seems to be the main guy, and he recently posted a video regarding an update that they've been planning to make to the index, which is in the video, he kind of presents a summary document that states their mission as why free podcasting from corporate control, how integrate decentralized content with decentralized money, and what build a self-sustaining ecosystem for podcasting. And he then scrolls down to a different slide titled Podcast Lightning Value for Value Stack, and says that this will basically be an integration of the Lightning Network into the index under a pledge model, so not a play, where the Lightning payment that people can make as, kind of a tip to the podcaster is split into 3 parts, or at least 3 parts. 98% of the payment goes to the podcaster, 1% goes to the application developer, and I'm assuming he means Sphinx here because the Sphinx payment widget is on the site and it allows you to accept Bitcoin payments over Lightning to your website. And then the remaining 1% goes to the podcast index wallet in exchange for, I assume, being the aggregator and surfacing the podcast content to you to find. And so he also said that as a podcaster, you would be able to, at some point, I don't know how much of this is built out, but he says that you could further split the 98% into, going to your host, or maybe if you want to have the payment automatically split off to go to anyone working for you, like your video editor or audio, well, in this case, it would be audio engineer. I guess you could do that. And he then shows a demo of the process in action and some of the Sphinx UI and how you can adjust the amount you pay. And the UX seems pretty smooth, and he kind of shows that there's a testing group that's been helping him with this. And towards the end of the video, he says that he will be doing a further demo and webinar tomorrow on November 9th, which will probably have already happened by the time you're hearing this episode, unless you're listening live. But yeah, it sounds interesting because this is basically, I mean, there's been a few streaming money type applications. Like the first one was Lightning payments, or actually originally I think it was just Bitcoin payments for live streaming video. Before, where you paid, I think, based on the amount of the video that you watched or the number of videos or something like that. So this isn't the first thing to do this, but I think it's actually a really good fit because podcasting is growing in popularity, and I think more and more people are moving away from video just because, I mean, you know, it's
Multitask.
yeah. So, I mean, this seems like a really good fit. I'm not as familiar with this site in particular, but I do see it as cool that someone is developing applications to do, splitting off the payments automatically, and it seems to be relatively smooth. I'd like to see like the configuration options for that in terms of like how you actually like how much how many custom paths you can make. But that would be really cool to have.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, I'm really kind of skeptical in the long term of Lightning really being good for native micropayments, but as long as people consider that and potential routes to bolt more stuff on top, like stuff like this is awesome. Like whether it happens on Lightning natively or some layer on top, like micropayments for this type of content distribution is like, this is how you actually unfuck journalism. To really just put it bluntly. I mean, it's pretty much either find a way to monetize things yourself, which can be very, very hard these days, depending on the types of things you say, or just shut up about those things and go work at some bullshit media publication.
Yeah, I really need to write a follow-up document for revision control journalism to include a bunch of this stuff. Is now it's like I only wrote the last document in 2018 and it's already almost outdated, so I need to do that soon.
I think you're gonna have to rewrite faster and faster the more things like this get built out. Like I mean, I've been ranting all year that we are in a Bitcoin development renaissance, and I think this new Lightning Pool proposal should demonstrate that definitively. It's not just little chips being added at the edges. Like that too, in particular, it's just think about the synergy with something like this. Like receiving money over Lightning has been a big pain without service providers or liquidity providers, because where do you get the incoming liquidity from? Well, a nice distributed system like that would work very well if, streaming platforms like this really start picking up. Alrighty. Are we ready?
What's next?
WizKid Nadav Cohen solves another problem again. I actually think an episode or two ago, I literally just joked about as long as he solves this exact problem, then cool things will happen. And look, he did. Nadav posted on the SuredBits blog, let's say 4 days ago at this point, a scheme for transferring DLCs that are inside Lightning channels one hop through the Lightning Network. So let's say Alice and Bob have a DLC. If Carol wants to engage in that DLC, take over Bob's end, and also happens to have a channel open with Alice, then you can atomically kind of just move that DLC output from Alice and Bob's channel to Alice and Carol. And it's actually a really elegant setup in terms of just trust model. And I'll explain the weird edge case here that kind of makes this really elegant in my mind. But effectively, what would happen is Alice and Bob and Alice and Carol create a new HTLC output in each of their channels. And what Alice and Bob do is effectively move the DLC that they have on top of that HTLC so that you have a pre-image, which would let a success transaction go through and close the DLC and give Bob his money back. And then you have a time-locked failure transaction, which would just reopen the DLC as it was if the transfer failed. And then between Alice and Carol, you do the opposite. You would have a success transaction with the pre-image that opens the same DLC that Alice and Bob had between Alice and Carol, and a time-locked timeout path that would just give Carol her money back. And the idea here is pretty much either Bob or Carol, really doesn't matter, generates the pre-image for this HTLC that opens and closes a DLC. And really, hold on, let me decombobulate my head for a second. So pretty much the idea here is whoever generated the hash would give it to Alice, who would then settle out that side and pass the pre-image on to the other side and settle that out. And this creates a nice situation here in terms of execution paths with one weird case. So in a success situation, everything works out. Bob and Alice close their DLC, and Alice and Carol open one to replace the one that Alice had with Bob, and everything goes happy. The timeout execution, if things do not go through, then timeout, and this would just get updated in channel. Bob's DLC remains open, and Carol gets her money back in her full control in the channel. And now the bad scenario here, on the timeout transaction, that for Bob would reopen his DLC and for Carol would give her money back. The pre-image for the success path that closes Bob's DLC and opens one for Carol has a penalty path linked to that pre-image. And so the idea here is, let's say Bob wants to close things out, let that time out, and then pretty much cheat with Carol and share the pre-image so that one party can close theirs out as a transfer, but the other party can, just not open things, and you just leave Alice screwed here. Whoever generated the pre-image pretty much and tries to do that gets all of the money in the DLC confiscated. And so Alice, in this situation, winds up with the correct operation on one side and gets a free payout from the other. And now the weird screwy part is, what if, Alice got the pre-image from one side and didn't reveal it to the other? So let's say she closes out the DLC with Bob and doesn't open one with Alice, or vice versa, keeps the contract with Bob open, but also opens one with Carol. There's not really a problem here because Bob was always open to the possibility this fails and he's stuck in his contract. And Carol specifically wants to start this contract no matter what. So effectively, there's no real way that can go wrong in terms of either Bob or Carol did not have their side execute in a way that they fully expected it could execute. And so, this is a really nice structure in terms of market dynamics between makers and takers. I mean, in any kind of market with real liquidity, there's probably going to be a lot of connections to big makers. And this kind of construct allows them to just swap positions between different takers if one of them wants to exit. And it's definitely a lot of things to think through in terms of network topology and market topology. But in principle, as long as there is direct paths on the Lightning Network where people want to trade positions off between each other, in principle, I don't see any reason why you couldn't theoretically route something like this longer than just a single hop. But even thinking through that whole basket of eggs, like this is still incredibly useful in just the sense of a single hop. People can trade off their positions now and not just be stuck with them. So what problem should I joke that Nadav is just going to magically figure out? Because so far we're on the joke 2 weeks later it's solved timetable.
He could solve the Bitcoin privacy debate.
Tall order, but you know what? I'm sure Nadav can handle it.
I hope so.
Alrighty. So this next one is just a little chuckle, a little joke, a little. How could anybody have ever doubted Vitalik Buterin, guys? Dude, the first baby step, phase 0 into the first part of the 10-part plan to eventually deploy Ethereum 2.0. It's live, guys. It's live. Ethereum 2.0 is here. You can't call anybody a scammer anymore because that's a headline somewhere.
Honestly, I don't know actually if you're joking or not. Is Ethereum 2.0 here or not?
Phase 0 in step 1 of the 10-part plan to eventually fully roll it out is. Would you like to know what that actually means?
I'm sure you're going to attempt to tell me what it means. I don't know if we're ever going to know what it means.
It's a one-way smart contract on Ethereum 1.0 that lets you put 32 Ether into it and then start staking. And it's a one-way token. You can't get it out for 2 years at least. Oh, and if for any second at any point in time you go offline and don't sign off on the staking stuff properly, it starts taking your money away. Who would not want to put their 32 ETH into a completely useless one-way smart contract where if their internet fucks up for even an instant, they start losing money? I mean, come on, who wouldn't want to take that 2-year bet? Am I right?
Well, I feel like anyone who still has 32 ETH would probably be stupid enough to put in 32 ETH. Who does do you have to have exactly 32 ETH? What happens if you have less? What happens if you're not a meth whale?
From my understanding, no bueno. That's the required collateral to stake.
So how much is that again? Ethereum is worth what now? $100-something? What is it?
I couldn't tell you.
I mean, that's not a ton of money, but seriously, if you have 32 ETH, you should get rid of it as soon as possible. That's insane. I can't imagine even having 1 ETH or a percentage of an ETH.
Yeah. Stupid is as stupid does.
But I mean, yeah, so this lower bound of 30, you have to have 32, so I mean, what they don't want people with less to be stakers, or what is the what's the reasoning behind 32? Why is 32 the magic number?
Vitalik said so.
So, I mean, 21 million is the magic number in Bitcoin, where we don't really know why it was 21, but we do have this kind of this quasi explanation where it's based on,
Satoshi said so.
Yeah. Well, there's this calculation of 21 million or almost 21 million equals, how many Bitcoin would, come out over a day, and then multiply the days, blah blah blah, number of years, and that was the number of years that Satoshi thought was good to have the supply increase over. So is there any kind of even quasi explanation for 32 at all, or is it just pull the number out of my hat?
There might be, but I literally didn't care enough to investigate. This is solely on the news desk to laugh at how stupid this is. That's the whole point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand why you would have this lower bound of 32. Like, I feel like because but there is various arguments of proof of stake not being decentralized and how it's very easy to become centralized. And so I feel like saying, oh, you have to have X amount of money, or you can't be a staker, or at least you can't be an early staker at this point in time as the system is still being developed. Like, that feels very gatekeepy. It feels like a rich get richer kind of plan.
Well, I mean, that's the whole point of proof of stake, isn't it?
Well, I mean,
Oh no, wait.
these are
It was carbon emissions. Carbon emissions, right?
yeah, and I'm pretty sure that this is going to solve neither issue.
Wink, wink.
It's a strategy of don't eat the rich, give the rich more meth.
Exactly.
Let them eat meth.
So, are you ready for Shinobi's rant about how mining pools are enemies of Bitcoin?
Sure. How are they enemies of Bitcoin?
Well, BitMEX Research on election day dropped a piece looking at the growth of merge mining over the entire history of the blockchain. And if you haven't listened to my rants on this topic a lot, it goes through the difference between regular merge mining, where pools are actually validating and running nodes on that chain, and blind merge mining, where they just get paid in Bitcoin to commit to other people's blocks. I think that blind merge mining just delays all of these bad things I'm going to get into. It doesn't solve them. But the problem with regular merge mining is that starts distorting mining incentives, in the sense of you have to look at the overall income of the miner and consider the percentage in Bitcoin or Namecoin or whatever other shitcoin is being mined, and how that percentage distribution balances out. And ultimately, if this is really adopted widely and used for tokens that maintain a decent amount of value, you start creating this situation where in order to be a profitable miner, you can't just mine Bitcoin. You have to mine all of these other merged mine shitcoins, because if you're not, the people who do are going to outcompete you. And if the percentage of that income for miners that is not Bitcoin gets too big, you could have a situation where it's literally impossible to be a profitable miner unless you are also mining these other shitcoins, validating these other shitcoins, which effectively, in a really backdoor way with incentives, is the same thing as raising the block size of Bitcoin for miners. It's increasing the validation cost, which has more centralization pressure in order to be a profitable operation. And they kind of look at the two main ways, aside from shit like Veriblock, that merged mine chains are committed to, is either in an op return output or a part of the script sig for the Coinbase. And so they've looked at RSK and other identifiable op return commitments for these types of merge mine chains in the Coinbase through the entire history of the chain. And they've found that something like 50% of the miners are now merge mining RSK, and close to all of the miners are merge mining other unidentified op return chains, and obviously 100% at this point are committing SegWit witness commitments in the same area. But kind of a correlation I saw in here if you look at the amount of miners committing to Namecoin in their Coinbase, there was a massive spike from around 2011 to 2014 where it peaked at around 80% of the network. And then between 2014 and 2016 crashed down to like 5 to 10%. And now this correlates with two things. One, a bunch of software bugs in Namecoin that might have created a lot of problems for mining pools. But it also correlates with the massive crash in Namecoin's price, which rebounded during the 2017 bull market, and also showed a correlation rebound up to 84% of the commitment scheme being present in Coinbases that Namecoin uses. And so this really is a deadly serious problem for Bitcoin in terms of attack vectors. This can absolutely be used to start playing games with mining incentives, mining centralization pressures, and really, that could get fucked up. And the shitty thing about this is it's happening. There really is no way to stop miners who want to do this from finding some way to commit to a side chain in a Bitcoin block, because no matter what you do to make something they're using now invalid, they can just change the commitment structure to something else. And really, it's, I don't think there is a viable option here, so long as tokens that want to do this maintain actual market demand, except to just find the most efficient way to do this. Find the way to do this that adds the least centralization pressures, the least distortion to those markets, because ultimately, it just looks more and more like, hey, if the demand's there, they're going to do it. So figure out ways for these coins to do these things in a manner that does not actively start damaging Bitcoin itself the same way that block size increases would. Because, the entire existence of Bitcoin has just been mapped through this, and there is a pretty solid correlation between when it pumps and the money's there, it's going to happen.
So, in summary, how are mining pools the enemy of Bitcoin?
Because this kind of dynamic is exactly how, you keep miners coming to you. You look like a profitable, like lucrative trade-off, rather than looking at things like replacing pools with protocols, things like Better Hash, like a fully decentralized mining pool like P2 pool. Because if people look to those and build those things and they are competitive, maybe miners leave and start mining that way instead. And most of these major mining pools are participating in this. Like, I think if the effort is actually put into building mining protocols that decentralize pools like that, and those are actually built out, I think it is going to be a very stark incentive clash between mining pools and protocols like that in terms of how that's handled, how one responds to the other. I think that is going to be a very bad area where those incentives just do not align in a way that I think would benefit Bitcoin most. Mining pools, bad.
And who else is an enemy of Bitcoin that has been causing a stir?
Some dude who had a lot of Bitcoin. He took it from people. Is that what we're talking about? I'm confused. I just consumed mind-altering substances. I don't know what's going on.
Well, I did not look into this story at all. I just saw people screaming about a large amount of Bitcoin moving and a bunch of media articles about how Silk Road money was moving and losing their minds. So
Damn
what actually happened here?
I did have it right, and I just told everyone I'm high for no reason. Fuck. Well, so TLDR, the U.S. government has civilly seized 69,000 bitcoins that ultimately trace back to Silk Road when it was operational. And in their opinion, fits a pattern unlike any user or merchant or Silk Road employee withdrawal. So they have characterized this as likely a theft of coins from Silk Road. Well, whoever this dummy is, I think it was in 2015. He sent 101 bitcoins to BTCE, which, for everyone who knows their history, was a gigantic honeypot that dumped so much fun information into the government's hand. It's not even funny. And so, I'm assuming because of that transaction, individual X, whose identity is known to the government, was determined to be in control of that address. So they have seized these coins, both under the assertion of being stolen property involved in a Computer Fraud and Abuse Act violation, as well as being proceeds from drug trades. So, yeah, they have pretty much taken this money. It's ours now. And it's not really clear right now whether any kind of criminal charges or anything are going to be slapped on individual X. But given the fact that he just voluntarily gave this up, I think there is a very high likelihood that there was some kind of plea agreement involved here of take coins and don't send me to jail, please. But yeah, that's what actually happened. Everything on Twitter was a frenzy of digging through darknet market urban myths about a wallet that people were passing around with 70,000 Bitcoin on it and selling it for people to crack, which I find absolutely no reason to believe whatsoever.
Fun.
Now, the interesting question I'm going to ask, given where we are at in terms of market cycle and activity lately, is which individuals who probably wind up having close ties to bureaucrats and government officials end up buying said 69,000 bitcoins? Because unless they magically get new laws through Congress, they legally have to sell it.
Yeah, and who's gonna want to buy it?
I mean, I am not gonna lie. Looking at this in totality, my first thought has just been like the government knew exactly who this dude was and that he had this and probably has for a very long time, and just kind of left that there as a we'll grab that when we want it. And there goes Janine, AFK to never be seen again. A wild Janine appears. But yeah, it's like I really think that they have just watched this guy for a while. I feel very confident that that has a high probability of being what happened, and he just kind of was left there because hey, when we want to, we're just going to take this now.
Yep.
So I am going to be keeping a very close eye on when this gets auctioned and who bought them and seeing what little threads pop up there because I just can't get that suspicion out of my brain.
Well, the fun part is that whoever does buy the Bitcoin is putting themselves in another scenario where the government knows that you have Bitcoin and exactly how much.
Yeah, but they might be, unofficially part of the government, so that doesn't matter because they're part of the club.
Of course, if the government was smart at all, they would just keep it. But they're not.
Thank God for that. Alrighty, though. I do believe some other dipshits recently got into some legal trouble for taking things that don't belong to them.
Oh yeah, then they did more than that. So basically, this is a bit, it's not new news, but it was based on a blog post by Brian Krebs, so I saw it for that reason. And so basically, on September 9th, so over almost 2 months ago, actually, there was a superseding indictment for 21-year-old Jordan Milson and almost 20-year-old Kyle Bryan, or Kai. So it's one of those names where you can tell their parents probably chose a very fancy way of spelling an otherwise normal name, I think. But anyway, indictment filed in the District Court of Maryland for charges such as unauthorized access of and intentional damage to a protected computer, aggravated identity theft, and wire fraud conspiracy. And as Brian Krebs summarized in his post, they, quote, hijacked social media and Bitcoin accounts using a mix of voice phishing or vishing attacks and SIM swapping, a form of fraud that involves bribing or tricking employees at mobile phone companies. And so in this indictment, there are 4 individual victims included as being affected or targeted by them. One of them, individual victim 4, is described as a resident of Rhode Island and an investor in digital currency. Individual victim 4 had a social media account with a 2-character username coveted by other social media users for its uniqueness and simplicity. I'm pretty sure it would not be that hard to figure out who that is based on that description, but we will move along. According to the indictment, Milson, one of the defendants, stole almost $17,000 worth of digital currency from individual victim 3, another person. But that is not all. As of page 4 of the indictment, it says that on or about June 26, 2019, Brian and others known and unknown to the grand jury from outside the state of Maryland anonymously called the Baltimore County Police Department and falsely reported that he, purporting to be a resident of the Milson family residence, had shot his father at the residence. The caller threatened to shoot himself and to shoot police officers if they attempted to confront him. This call was in fact a swatting attack in retaliation for Milson failing to share the proceeds of the theft of digital currency, as described further in this superseding indictment. So basically, I mean, I don't know if this was the thing that got them caught, but it sounds like it's a big part of what got them caught, which is that they had a fight over the money and he tried to swat his own conspirator and that probably resulted in them getting caught. But this is not the first this is one of the more interesting SIM swapping cases that I think I've seen, where they swatted their partner or tried to get their partner swatted, but this case is very similar in terms of, the goals and tactics to that of Joel Ortis, which we covered in episode 118. He was described in Motherboard as a prolific SIM hijacker who mainly targeted victims to steal their cryptocurrency, but also to take over their social media accounts with the goal of selling them for Bitcoin. According to investigators, as well as people in the SIM swapping community, Ortiz was a member of OG Users, a website where members trade valuable Instagram or Twitter accounts. And I didn't see a mention of that in particular in this case, but it may be at play if they were targeting someone specifically because they had a high value social media account username. And then in episode 177, there was that was when we talked about a former engineering lead at BitGo who SIM swapped and lost over $100,000 from his Coinbase account. And there was another customer from Coinbase who got SIM swapped, I believe it was this year. We talked about in episode 208, and they lost close to $90,000 worth of, they don't ever, I think in that case, they didn't say what cryptocurrency it was. They just usually say digital currency. And then there was the SIM swappers who got arrested in 2019, Eric Meggs and Declan Harrington, which we talked about in 199. And they had actually targeted the executives of cryptocurrency companies, and one of their alleged goals was to, again, acquire high-value / OG social media accounts. So it seems like, this is another case that is very similar to previous ones, where they're instead of targeting people to sim swap them in order to get maybe compromising information from them, or just to scare them, or some other thing, which used to be the goal of people who did this. It's now switched to wanting to acquire social media accounts that can be resold, and also to get cryptocurrency. So I feel like this is going to keep happening, because fundamentally the security model of phones has not really changed. There's still pieces of garbage. You don't actually like, that's kind of one of the odd things about stories where they say, oh, they stole someone's phone number. I mean, fundamentally, your phone number is not something you own. You have very little control over your phone number, these cases indicate, because they can just, all you need is a low-wage employee at your phone company to be like, yeah, whatever, I'll give it to someone else. And that's about it. Like, you don't control your phone number. Phone numbers should not be treated as identifiers, even though they are, unfortunately. So this is going to keep happening as long as people are using phones in ways that do not actually match the security model.
Phones should be like Tor endpoints, where they also have a private public key relationship as an identity, and everybody's phones should be like, hey, is this really my buddy's key when it comes through? And that is how phones should work. But they will never work that way.
I mean, that's basically how I treat phone numbers. First of all, the UX of like entering phone numbers is really broken, and I say this as a person who does not use phones very often at all, but like the times that I have used Signal, for example, and I had to put someone's phone number in, and you have to like figure out, oh, well, international code, country code, blah blah blah. Like I don't know, phone numbers are just really dumb to me. Like they're so easy to fuck up that I just hate using them. Like, I have to like actually, I almost feel like there should just be a QR code or something. Like a QR code would be a better identifier than a phone number, because I hate these things. They're so, I just don't use phones. Phones suck.
The whole internet is broken.
Also, I find it like, I mean, it's kind of similar to bank accounts. Like, all of the hurdles that you have to go through nowadays, unless you go to shops that don't do this, but the number of hurdles you have to go through to like just get a SIM card, it is just bizarre. Like, and there's still banks in the world that when you're opening a bank account, you like, they ask for information that they don't need, and they also have requirements that appear really stupid. Like, there's some banks that literally say you can't sign up with us unless you already have a bank account somewhere else. The weirdest industry ever. Like, can you imagine if you go to a grocery store and they're like, sorry, you can't shop here unless you're already a customer of our competitor? Like, it just makes no sense. And apparently the reason for this sometimes in banking is because they don't have enough money to do compliance. If they're a little bank, they don't have enough money to do compliance, and so they basically have this requirement of you having to have already gotten a bank account somewhere else, because then they know, oh, you're safe because you've been hacked by them. Like, it's just, I don't know. I find phones and banking to be so outdated. Like the people who say that like regular bank accounts are easy to use, I mean, I guess my brain has just been warped too much by Bitcoin, because I have never found Bitcoin difficult to use nearly as much as bank accounts.
It's not warped at all. the same way that Bitcoin takes all that bullshit and turns it into an app on your phone, like all of the same shit is possible for things like phone numbers, like your cellular network. There is no reason why a cell network should not just be a totally open thing with just like anonymized auth credentials to physically connect to the network. There is no reason why your phone number can't be a key that you securely manage, that you hand out to people. They actually verify that. When you're calling their phone, it's sending along a signature, hey, this is really me. And no centralized directory, just your phone verifies that. There is no reason that all of the types of shit Bitcoin does to the stupid like world of finance and banking regulations, you can't apply other technologies to things like cellular communications and phones. It's just they don't want to give up the centralized silo and the control that brings.
Yep.
Pretty fuckers. Alrighty though. Are we ready for a stroll down summary lane?
Yes.
So, a little late as far as when the paper dropped, but Musig 2 has officially been spec'd out and released by Blockstream. And this is a very nice thing in terms of the ability to either do an interactive setup or do interactive signing. And depending on which one of those you choose, there's no interaction required in the other. So to kind of put the whole progress of Musig in context, the original spec effectively required a counter that clients would have to track, and losing that could result in private key leaks because that counter was what actually guaranteed that a malicious member in a multi-sig couldn't switch their nonce out while you reuse yours, and thereby get two signatures that would allow them to figure out your private key. And that is very bad for a whole host of reasons, such as if you lose that number, you can very much get tricked into signing things and lose all of your coins. Enter Musig deterministic nonce. They generated and came up with a whole new function for nonce generation to create a zero knowledge based scheme where you would effectively exchange your actual multi-sig keys with everybody, but then also a nonce key. And this function was specifically designed so that when deriving nonces, you can actually generate a zero knowledge proof that isn't too unwieldy to prove you did that correctly. And this requires tracking no state or numbers of any kind, but it requires playing with zero knowledge proofs. And so that is really good in the sense of there's no more losing something and you can get tricked. Well, enter Musig 2. Pretty much the general trick here is instead of having one nonce source, everybody has two. And then the way to generate the global nonce for the whole multi-sig transaction is effectively hashing all of the individual nonce pairs, the aggregate key that's signing things, and the message, and taking that value and kind of performing some fancy math with your two individual nonces to smush those together and smush the result of that into the big global nonce. And the trick here is that in that process, if anybody were to try to change out one of theirs or a subset of the nonces that go into creating the global one, then it changes the hash value of hashing the nonces, the multi-sig key, and the message that's being signed. And so like there's really kind kind of that defense there in terms of somebody tweaking with things is going to change everything. But you do have to kind of, exchange nonce pairs in the creation of a multi-sig ahead of time. And that's where the neat little trade-off comes in. You can either do that exchange ahead of time interactively in the setup of the wallet, and then signing is effectively just pass around, spit out a signature. There's no interaction required. Or you can just take the multi-sig keys, create a multi-sig from that, but then have to interact when signing in order to pass the nonces around. And so there's really a lot of design play there. And it's really just kind of, nuts in totality to look at something like this and just look at how many different design trade-offs there are. The different security modes you can take, like how much state you have to track, whether you track state or not, that have little subtle implications for how that signing process is actually conducted and how expensive that signing process is versus other security trade-offs in that. And it's really just nuts to think that something as simple as multi-sig has really become this advanced. I mean, like, Ginny, what's the running joke about Ethereum and multi-sig?
That Ethereum claims to be able to do smart contracts, and yet the multi-sig wallet is like one of the most basic smart contracts, and it can't even do that, right?
Yep. And it's like just like the fucking like flexibility of this, like in terms of like you can do an interactive setup for non-interactive signing for anything that is involving air-gapped keys, or if you want to just have the quickest like signing operations possible, or you can use something like musig dn if you want to have that zero knowledge proof that like no shenanigans are going on with the nonces. And it's just like, I mean, multi-sig is not just what's the numbers in n of n or m of n anymore. It's like, look at how nuanced like the trade-offs and the possibilities here are now. Suck it, Ethereum.
Don't you mean smoke it?
Yeah, I'll take that. So what else we got going on in terms of announcements of things dropping?
Well, as you all may remember, back in June, Nopara, Nothing Much, and Istvan released the draft for a new variable amount Chaumian CoinJoin protocol called Wasabi, which they explained is named after a Japanese term for accepting the world, its imperfection, and finding beauty in this imperfection. And rather than trying to turn November 5th into KYC Day, like BitMEX, the Wasabi team has instead released their timeline for the rollout of Wasabi Wallet 2.0 with a, quote, combination of user interface, user experience, and CoinJoin improvements, including the debut of Wasabi. And something else they note in the list of changes is that regarding user experience, manual coin joining will be a thing of the past or for power users only. So I guess there's going to be a lot of automation coming to that, which will help move Wasabi more towards, I guess it's a new thing to say, the Peter McCormick wallet, because it sounds like that's what he would want. And their timeline for when this new Wasabi wallet will become available has various estimates. The most likely case that they give is 9 months, which would be next summer in June or July, depending on when they see the start point. The worst case deadline would be 14 months, which is the new year of 2022. And that sounds really weird to be saying that. I can't believe we're already thinking of 2022. That's very weird. But yeah, Wasabi 2.0 is now on a deadline schedule.
Woo! Yeah, I know at least with nothing much. Like, he has been putting a lot of thought into UX flow, and especially like simplifying that and letting the work to be able to convey things like pay joins inside of coin joins and things to a normal user. And yeah, I am really looking forward to what comes out of that in the end, because that is kind of a tall order in terms of complex interactions that you need to boil down so that somebody like Peter can actually understand what he's doing.
Yep.
Alrighty. So this last little thing is honestly just a quick check-in. And I don't know. I don't really think there's anything definitive to see here in terms of results. But
Wait, you skipped poem.
what? Poem? Okay, poem.
Well, so if anyone didn't notice, it was the 5th of November recently, and in the last episode, I kind of complained about the fact that BitMEX had put their user verification deadline on November 5th, and so when they tweeted out on the 4th that they were reminding people, quote, the vast majority of our users by volume have completed user verification until 5th of November 2020 at, and this is really confusing, they said 00 UTC, which it's not clear to me. That would be midnight between November 4th and November 5th, right?
I can't do math.
Or do they mean midnight between November 5th and 6th? I'm assuming the former, but I don't. Honestly, this is why you don't put things at midnight, because that's a terrible idea. Anyway, so deadline was November 5th at some point. And so when they shared that, I wrote a little poem, which was, remember the 5th of November, identity completion is fraught. I know of no reason why the KYC treason should ever we adopt. And of course, I did the obligatory thing of watching V for Vendetta on that day.
Seriously, fuck those fuckers. It's like they stole Candyland from everybody.
But I find it a much better thing to celebrate that Wasabi announced their timeline for Wasabi 2.0. That's a much better thing to have on that day.
I agree.
Now back to the scheduled programming.
Achoo.
Deprogramming. That should be our new slogan. Back to the scheduled deprogramming.
Yeah. I dig it. All right, though. As far as programming goes, the stupid Bermuda government token pilot program. So Stablehouse, one of the partners in this, wrote a little write-up at the end of last month, and pretty much just boiled down to summarizing the reasons for this again, and then just going into a little detail in terms of point of sale systems being passed out, actually being built on M5 stack devices. I think the name of it was, they're the base for the Bowser DIY hardware wallet, and a number of other fun Lightning point of sale toys and stuff, but hooked up to a BTC Pay server instance. And pretty much the fact that in actually issuing the token, one of their requirements for this was it was only to be spendable at the test merchants during the pilot program. And so they effectively just bypassed the standard Blockstream AMP controls as far as for approval or disapproval conditions, and just filtered that through their own systems entirely, and just manually called to the AMP instance an approval or a failure based on funneling through their own criteria. So really nothing in here really looks at any of the economics or use levels or any kind of, pilot users feedback or anything. But I just kind of wanted to touch on this a bit just in showing how simple this was for a small government like this to just bypass the default AMP restrictions that didn't fit their use cases and build their own filter to hook into AMP's API. Because what they've effectively done here is set up this BTC Pay server instance, which in real time communicates with their approval software for any signature, because this is all 2 of 2 multi-sig with this server enforcing restrictions. And kind of just seamlessly add merchants' addresses to the whitelist for the AMP server. And so it's just, this was only a month or so ago. And they've already hacked together with open tools out there a completely controlled closed loop token system on Liquid. And yeah, that's pretty fast. And it's pretty interesting to me that they actually used all of these open tools, hardware, software projects that a lot of people use in this space to be as independent and self-sovereign with their use of Bitcoin as possible, to effectively build a system that does the exact opposite with a fiat token. And more importantly, how fast they were able to do that. So yeah, Liquid is just weirder and weirder in my mind, looking at the polar opposite things that can exist on it.
I'm surprised they didn't give it a catchy name like the Bermuda Triangle of DeFi.
I'm just kind of wondering how weird it is. What is it going to be like when you just have things like that coexisting with the polar opposite of it? It's shit's going to get fucking weird this decade. Well, I guess that's a wrap. So beep boop thought load.
Well, my thought is kind of something I think this might have happened on the day that we recorded the last episode, but anyway, I don't know why. I guess apparently there's a thing called the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists, which sounds like a very specific thing that doesn't exist. I have no idea if this is a real day or not. Probably not. Anyway, Mike Pompeo made a tweet where he said, "Journalists perform a critical role in society, but they are too often threatened, attacked, or murdered, crimes that often go unpunished. On International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists, we call on all governments to investigate and redress these crimes." And the image says, "A free press is essential to an informed citizenry." And I would just like to say, this is the same guy who referred to WikiLeaks as a hostile foreign intelligence agency. And that is literally quoted in the frickin' indictment against Assange that he is fighting right now in the UK. So I would just like to say, fuck Mike Pompeo. I mean, seriously, fuck everyone in the US government at this point, but especially Mike Pompeo. And yeah, this is not the first person, there seems to be this kind of trend of literally the people who do the most to target journalists and make journalists afraid to be actual journalists and do actual journalism instead of stenography, like most of them tend to do. And yeah, I think it was not the prime minister, but the secretary of state in the UK did something similar where literally I think it was around the time that Assange was arrested last year. He was at a press freedom event and he, it's just so bizarre that these people are literally the exact opposite of what they preach. And that's going to come into play even more in the next couple of months because, regardless of who ends up actually being president, who knows? It's probably going to be Biden. I don't know. Just because whatever they're they've just decided to switch to the Democrats, Democratic war criminals instead of the Republican ones or the undecided whatever. And what's going to happen is that a bunch of people are going to be like, oh, well, Trump's not the president anymore. That means that the case against WikiLeaks can't be politically motivated. Because part of the argument is that this is a politically motivated case by the Trump administration. And I find it unfortunate that there has been so much focus on the Trump administration's political bent and not just the general political bent of the US government, and like a bunch of previous administrations put together has not been focused on more broadly, because the idea that Biden being the president is at all going to change the overall agenda of the US government against Assange and WikiLeaks is laughable. Because you had Obama being the president who prosecuted more whistleblowers combined than all of the previous administrations before him. And Trump has also been doing the same. Fundamentally, these people are not different. I'm not going to wait for pardons from them, because fundamentally they're not any different to me. These presidencies are indistinguishable to me from that point of view, because they're all targeting journalists, because fundamentally the structures of power, it doesn't matter who's sitting at the top, what puppet you have, they are all threatened by actual journalists doing actual journalism, and that will continue to be the case as long as we have a state, especially one that works like the US government does. So it's going to be an interesting couple of months coming up.
I think it's going to get even weirder than that. What better way to usher in the post-truth era than just create two alternate realities with different presidents?
Well, I don't know if people can handle that. It would be, I mean, if you're talking about the US splitting into factions, or I don't know, maybe states will actually become states and have some say in how they govern themselves, which hasn't really been the case so far. Something that will be really interesting from my point of view in this topic is there was an article in Lawfare blog about the ability of Trump to sell national security secrets before or after he leaves as president, and that he might use this kind of ability as a threat to keep the presidency. And as Jonathan Rauch put it, he said, "Isn't it surreal that we even need to ponder this question?" And I find it amazing that question can even be pondered, because basically it comes down to that the president in the US is the person who determines what information is classified and what is not. He's considered the ultimate authority on that. So there's this open question of, well, if he's the ultimate authority on that, couldn't he technically declassify a bunch of things that are of interest to other countries or actors, whoever they may be, for whatever reasons? I find that to be amazing, considering that the US government is literally willing to put someone away in prison multiple people, willing to put multiple people in prison for decades, if not the rest of their life, for giving the same kind of information to the public with the goal of reforming and preventing criminal activity. And yet the president has the ability to potentially just declassify a bunch of stuff regardless, and even sell it as a way to keep power.
Ginny,
that is insane.
You just proved I think, my entire point about two alternate realities, because I have never even seen that considered brought up, but I have seen declassifying things that are of interest to the American people in terms of corruption. And that's what I mean. Like it's like every single point that is brought up, there is instantly a branch in reality where one side is interpreting it in a wildly different way than the other at this point and just trying to spin the narrative around it. And it's like every single thing going on right now, that's what's happening.
But yeah, I mean, connected to the Pompeo thing, it's just amazing to me that, like, on the one hand, you have these people in the US government who are claiming that they want to end impunity, and at the same time, they might use their own impunity to keep power. Like, this is all just, it's so bizarre to me that this is what people find acceptable, that people are fighting over the red and blue Goldman Sachs, and yet, like, this is the system you're endorsing. This is the system that you're implicitly consenting to when you have these debates, is like you think that whoever wins in that debate matters, and it's the completely wrong debate to be even having.
I think we are far beyond that at this point, and just what people are going to believe and how they're going to act. And it's just like, this is why I have been almost entirely quiet on everything since election day, and I'm not running around screaming on Twitter like 90% of people, is because this is an actual fog of war now. Everything is being spun polar opposite ways by each side. Everything is being brought up just to do that. Like, this is really kind of scary. Like, I consider myself a pretty intelligent person that can dig to the bottom of shit pretty quickly. And everywhere I look, that's not so easy to do right now on anything.
Well, if it makes anyone else who does still believe in the system any better and does get anxiety around election day specifically, I would just like you to know that the anxiety that you feel around election day about your life feeling like it hinges on who does or does not win the office of the president, that's how I feel every day about just living under systems like this in general. So if you felt like you've lost your mind watching this catastrophe, yep, welcome to the club.
I'm just saying, I don't see a resolution here where everybody agrees on the outcome. I see an attempt at one and a repeat of this summer down the line.
You know what? It would be really funny because there's been this kind of running joke over the past couple of days, especially about, like, where's the voting machine node, and is the election is the ballot counting software open source? And it's like, guys, that's just fundamentally not going to happen. I can't see that happening. Like, the idea that they're going to give you the power to verify whether an election decision was legitimate, like, are you, like, people seem to think that this, I don't know. I mean, this is kind of a very long outro where we're talking about something not Bitcoin, but the idea, like, the chances of them giving you the ability to verify election results is about as likely as the chance of them giving you the power to verify the money supply of the US dollar. Like, they are different things, but they are very similar, and there's a reason that you're not able to do stuff like that.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know. Unless you got anything else to add, I think we should just round this off here before we have an entire hour on politics. So yeah, I guess strap in for the shit show of the last bit of the year, punks. We'll catch you next week.
And in the true American tradition, Merry Christmas.
Was there
상에 쳤을 때 인간 후추야 이시네 야스네 이리 썩 머리야